Hello and welcome back to Marketing Tip Tea Time at 222. I'm your host, Aaron Zimala, and this month is March, and so you guessed it, that means that we are in the middle of Music March, our series to help creatives and musicians learn more about marketing, pricing, and general business practices. First, we're actually going to go to a video, which is our musical guest today, Blayne Chastain and Peter Romero. I hope you enjoy. That was a fantastic performance. Again, that is Blayne Chastain and Peter Romero performing a piece. And actually today, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Blayne Chastain, who you saw in the video playing the Irish flute, who is joining us today to talk about all of his extensive knowledge in the music industry. He graduated with his bachelor's in music business from Berkeley, and then went to get his master's in traditional Irish music performance from the University of Limerick in Ireland. He then went on to work in music publishing and management in Nashville, Tennessee, before he broke off to freelance and is now in Greeley, Colorado as the owner of the Irish Flute Store and the music director of St. Patrick's in downtown Greeley. Please, everyone, give a round of applause for Blayne Chastain. Let's see, there he is. Oh my gosh.
The sound of two hands clapping.
How are you?
Doing good, man.
Good.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we're doing well.
I've almost finished a whole donut, so I can't complain.
I'm donutless actually, so
yeah,
that's disappointing. But the tea today we have is Earl Grey. Everyone's familiar with that. Very florally kind of smell. It's oil of bergamot or bergamot, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But here we go. I'll try.
I started drinking. I learned how to drink kind of black tea from my first boss in, well, my first job I got out of college in Nashville was My boss was from England, and he drank a lot of
Oh.
black tea. Like I think it was English breakfast tea, and he's the first person I knew that drank it with milk and sugar, and so that was kind of I'd actually never heard of anybody doing that, and then we started drinking it every day. So
Really? Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I think here we call that like a London fog, essentially.
oh yeah.
Yeah, where it's like sugar and milk.
Yeah, this was
What?
this was a guy named Torquil Creevy. He kind of an interesting name, but he used to be the administrator for Sting's publishing catalog, and then he moved to Nashville and started his own publishing company, and I was sort of his, assistant or whatever. So
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I mean, that's what we're going to dive in today, is really talking about music and how creatives can get themselves out there a little more. Again, everyone, shout out to Connor Shaw, who gave us this idea. If you are in the audience right now and you're watching and you have any questions, please drop them in, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible that Blayne can help to answer. So, as I understand it, you worked in Nashville, Tennessee, in publishing and management. And many times musicians get mixed up with all of the different licensing. There's sync licensing, there's mechanical licensing, there's all types of different licensing. Can you talk a little bit about the different types of licensing and what musicians should be thinking about so that they can navigate that world?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's pretty common knowledge now that, unless you're a really, really large, real popular artist, you're not making a ton of money from royalties from streaming music.
Right.
It just has something to do with the way that the streaming model works. And but before that, of course, we would make our money as artists from selling CDs or that sort of thing. And so, but as far as the licensing goes, or the royalties that you would get royalties from mechanicals. So mechanical license is like if you wrote a song that was on an album, and you get a certain amount per unit sold for those mechanicals. I think the term mechanical came from back when they used to sell the mechanical, what was it, where music would play on these,
those big things.
Wasn't it the player pianos or whatever that had like the mechanical deal that you put in there, and it would, I think that's where the term mechanical came from. But anyways, mechanical royalties are like when the royalties from like physical product sold. I suppose it still applies to like if you sold an album, not just like a stream, but like if you sold like say on Apple iTunes or Apple Music, somebody purchased like wasn't just listening to your stream, but like paid you $1 for a song of yours. Part of that dollar, there would be a mechanical royalty in that. So, and then of course you got performing rights royalties that where you as a songwriter you would register, you would affiliate with a performing rights society such as BMI, ASCAP, or
Got it.
What's the other one? CSAC in the United States. I think it's SOCAN in Canada. But they basically, like if you say Patrick's Pub across the street, they have to pay ASCAP and BMI these sort of blanket fees so that like anytime an artist's songs played in their pub, they theoretically get paid for that. It's a really weird deal because it's sort of like it's a very sort of imperfect science how performing rights royalties get paid out to the artist. And I would think unless you're a major artist, a lot of the independent artists are largely getting overlooked in that calculation. And then so there's performing rights, and then there's sync licensing. So if you've written something and it gets used in a commercial or in a film, you could get paid for that. And that honestly is like probably the most lucrative way to, make money in music right now.
Right.
Sync licensing is different. It's not, there's not like a set rate like what there is with mechanical licensing. I think it was like with mechanical licenses that it's like, the last album that I did, Fiddle and Flute, is an Irish music album. If I used somebody else's tune that was not in the public domain, but it was a modern composition, I would owe whatever the rate was at the time, something like 8 cents per CD sold.
Okay.
Something like that. It changes like every year, so it's probably at 9 cents now or whatever. So that's like a set thing. But sync licensing is sort of a negotiated thing. And so I remember I used to work for a company in Nashville called Copyright Management, Inc., and there was a woman there that's all she did. She handled sync licensing requests by people wanting to use music from our catalog, and she would basically just negotiate a term. And usually, I mean, sync licensing is usually pretty expensive. But now companies now, like the Music Bed and Artlist and various companies that are now have an online presence, have tried to make it more affordable for the filmmaker to be able to license music for film. And so, yeah, you can kind of have a look at those kinds of websites, like Music Bed and Artlist would be the two that I've used a lot myself. Having a history and doing some video production over the years myself. So
sweet, yeah. I mean, it is an area that you can get really, really lost in. So it's good to have that kind of information to know what the different types are and how they're negotiated and how they're paid out as well.
Yeah, I think, Aaron, honestly, the thing is some people get really caught up in all of that. The reality is that just to get going as a musician, most of us are now using services like CD Baby or various digital distribution services, and so they ask you all the questions that you need to answer in terms that will help them properly get your music licensed and represented, and you just do that and let a company like that distribute your stuff to all the places. And then, eventually you see a little bit of royalties, come back to you. So
right, that's good.
So the point is just not to get super bogged down in it.
Right.
It's just it's something that you kind of figure out over time for sure.
Exactly. And musicians always are. I think sometimes, and creatives in general, are struggling to figure out how to get those revenue streams going. And many musicians have had to rely heavily on the gig market. And by gig, I don't mean going and gigging somewhere, but the gig is in remote work kind of market to make, some people have done teaching, some people are doing literally virtual gigs in the gig economy. Some people are doing recording projects. What should musicians be thinking about when they're trying to get into this remote gig work kind of economy that's happening? I mean, I think you've got your finger on the pulse of that pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say thankfully, and I catch myself. Honestly, it'd be great to be working full time as a gigging artist. And there was a time that I did do that, but I mean, the number one thing is to make sure that you kind of understand what to expect in terms of what fee to charge and that sort of thing. I think largely that's determined upon your market. I remember when I was so I worked when I first moved to Nashville. I lived in Nashville for 4 years after graduating from Berklee. And by the way, it's Berklee College of Music because a lot of folks think of UC Berkeley in California.
Right.
But Berklee, the music school, as many musicians know, is spelled Berklee, and it was named after the founder Lee Berk, so it's sort of a play on his name. So yeah, Berklee. So after Berkeley, I went to Nashville, and the first 2 years I worked in the business. But after that, I decided that I really wanted to be more on the creating side of the, creating music side of things rather than the business side. I had a degree in music business, but really my passion was in creating music and playing and performing, that sort of thing. And I remember I was, before I set off and did that full time, I was playing for an artist, independent artist, and we'd play little coffee shops or various venues, and she would charge folks, I don't know, $150 to $300 to come and play a show. And when I quit my day job and decided to gig full time, or I taught and I performed and recorded and stuff like that, I first started figuring out, okay, what is like the rate we can charge? Like we were looking to get, I was starting to book her at colleges, and so I did a lot of research just trying to figure out how much we could charge, and I found out the typical budget that colleges had to bring in artists was about, at that time, $1,500 per show. And so wow. just by doing the research, just by doing some research, which didn't take long at all, I figured out, we're charging $150 or $300, to go play somewhere, and now we realize, okay, $1,500 is the standard, and so we started asking that, and nobody batted an eye at it. I mean, it was just the standard sort of thing, and so we made a good little go for a couple years playing colleges all throughout, really the eastern side of the U.S. But I would get on the phone every day and book a bunch of shows, and we'd go out for 2 weeks at a time and make good money playing music for folks around the east side of the U.S., and it was a good living,
Wow.
So yeah, I think
so. It's really
just
that research, then.
Yeah,
right.
And
is that?
Yeah, and of course it just depends. Like if somebody asked me to play like guitar or flute or whatever on a track, you kind of figure out like what other folks in your space are charging, and you kind of go from there.
So is it faux pas? I was actually talking with a musician not too long ago who said that one of the reasons that he is having such a hard time pricing himself is because nobody's sharing their prices in his circle. So he doesn't really know exactly what to charge. Is it considered a faux pas to just ask someone outright, hey, what are you charging for this kind of stuff? Is that not okay?
If it is, I would just plead ignorance, or you have to find out some way, and I would just ask. I'd be like, hey, what are you charging for laying down fiddle on this track? Or what do you normally charge? Mm-hmm. I honestly think most people are pretty open about that, and if obviously if you're talking to somebody that's not open about it, well then talk to the next person that you know. But you got to figure that out. I mean, you could do it that way by asking your peers, and I think mostly that'd be the way to do it. Because honestly, I guarantee you, if like you asked 5 of your peers how much they're charging, a good majority are undercharging what they should.
Right.
There's probably, sort of a sweet spot in terms of what folks are willing to pay for. I think as artists, we tend to undervalue what we do.
I would agree.
Typically. Mm-hmm. So.
Yep.
The one thing that I try to encourage folks to think about is what is your time worth to you?
Right. Because
at a certain point in my career, I realized that I started when I raised my teaching rate to $60 an hour. I started thinking, well, how is my teaching rate any different? How is my teaching hour any different from any other hour that I put in as a musician, right?
Right.
And this was years ago. Honestly, I've kept that rate the same for so many years, and I really should raise it. But anyways, I thought, well, if $60 an hour is my teaching rate, then that's just my rate. So if somebody wants me to go play a gig and I'm going to play for 2 hours, then it's $120 for those 2 hours. And then I also need to be compensated for my travel and my mileage and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of came up with that because at the same time, like I used to do some video production work, and that's exactly how we would charge. We had an hourly rate or a day rate or a half day rate, and then we would also charge for mileage, something like 50 cents a mile, and then like our travel time, we would charge half rate. So say, for example, if I'm $60 an hour as a musician, or for my teaching rate, and I decide that's my hourly rate for everything I do, then, I play a gig for 2 hours, that's $120. It took me an hour to get there, an hour to get back, so that's 2 hours of drive time. 2 hours of drive time, charging half rate, that'd be $60, and so you do your mileage at 50 cents a mile, and so it's an easy calculation, and you can be very transparent with your client, whoever's booking you, just to say, this is what I would charge, and this is the itemization if you need it, but this is what it is. And then what's great about that is if they say, well, we're say for example that gig, right, that you're going to play for 2 hours and you have to drive 2 hours round trip, and there's mileage to figure in, and say they're like, well, we were hoping we could get you to play for $50, then that makes it super easy for you to say, oh well, yeah, I just can't do that. I hope you can find somebody. It makes it easy to say. It makes it easy to say no.
Or so having that consistency is important then across. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and if you say yes to a gig like that, then the sacrifice you're making, and it may be something where you want to say yes to it because one, you may just want to do it just because you think it'd be fun, or it'd be a good way to like network or whatever. But I think more and more as you sort of have developed sort of like, once you start getting booked more and you're able to say, I mean, sometimes you just need $50 to pay the bills, for sure, But once you get to the point where, the opportunity cost of taking that gig that's only going to pay you $50 and tying up your weekend, if it's a weekend gig, and then not being able to say yes to the gigs that will actually pay you a proper rate. There's opportunity cost to saying yes to those gigs that aren't really paying you a proper rate. So,
yes, I mean that's so true. I talk with people about opportunity cost all the time, and it's a cost that is usually overlooked. Like, what can you be doing with that time? And so that's
and the opportunity cost is not just it might be another gig, but it could be just like the opportunity of being able to spend more time with your family instead of taking a gig that's not paying you enough, really.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Pricing is hard in that instance. I think a lot of musicians have a hard time being consistent as well. They're kind of wheeling and dealing case by case. But then again, I think that a lot of musicians struggle with building a solid listener base, and that's something that you've built a really solid, what I would call tribe or community around, not only your Irish music but also around the Irish Flute Store. What are some ways that you have built this kind of a community so that if you are gigging, you can kind of point to these areas where you do have a base? How do you build that?
Well, I think largely my folks mostly know about me through my work as an Irish flute player, and I think it was sort of like a multi-step process, right? Like, I think what happened is I started years ago. It was almost 20 years ago. I started a business called Whistle and Drum, and I sold Irish whistles and Irish drums, the Bowra and the Irish drum, online, and I was one of the first people in the space to do that, and so people got to know me through that business, and it was sort of like a little side business that where we sold really cool instruments and became known worldwide for that, and then through that I started developing online courses for the Irish flute and whistle and drum, and so I would put up some videos on YouTube, and that brought people to my online courses, and so I had both a funnel, people coming from YouTube and then people coming from my online store to find out about my teaching. And through my teaching, they also go, oh, I like the way this guy plays, and oh, he did an album, and that's cool. And so that, I wouldn't say like I'm, I don't know. I've got a good base of folks that know and appreciate what I do. It's not like a massive, thing, but it's a very great supportive group of folks in the Irish music space, and yeah, so I've my online teaching has been actually a great source of income as a musician. Honestly, if I wanted to focus on that full time, I probably could, and just do that. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to make a career out of just online teaching. I mean, I've had since I started my online courses, I've had probably close to 2,000 students.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's a good amount of students.
Yeah. So if you can find a niche of what you love to teach, and of course, this all depends on whether or not you have sort of that gift of teaching and that love of it, which a lot of musicians do, honestly. I mean, I think, musicians, like any artist that's good at what they do, it didn't come by just like this idea of, oh, I just had talent and I just woke up one day and I was good at it. It came with a lot of like work and discipline, and so like a lot of us love teaching other people that want to get to where we are. And I mean, gosh, I'm still learning. I think a lot of us musicians, we're lifelong learners. And I mean, that's what we're doing here, is we're learning from each other.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. That's partially why we have this.
A little bit.
No, you're good. You're good. I mean, it's an important thing. I mean, I teach violin occasionally, and so that's something that I love, and I think that teaching is actually something that sometimes performers who have the I'm a performer mindset might overlook teaching. They might say that's not for me. But really, I've noticed that I've gotten better even at my music through teaching, right? It forces me to actually be good at what I'm doing if I'm going to teach somebody. So, and with all musicians, there's two sides of making a living as a musician. There's your technical ability of playing your instrument and how you do that. And then there's like this business side. And, do you have any tips on how to balance kind of those two areas that are kind of separate from each other?
Yeah, the creative and the business side. Some folks that know me well enough, I guess, think I'm fairly balanced at these sorts of things, and honestly I feel totally imbalanced. Ask my really good friends, and they'll tell you the same. Like Phil, he knows how imbalanced I am. Phil's our producer of the show here.
Hear me. I mean,
the TV show. Yep.
Yeah, I know that you can't hear you, Phil, but Phil's talking in my ear right now. But anyways, if you ask people that know me real well, they know how imbalanced I can be. But I think that's the struggle. It's like how do you do that? For me, and it really depends on your personality and your style. But for me, I have to compartmentalize. Like an ideal day for me is like the first half of the day is focused completely on creative work, and the second half of the day is focused on administration, business stuff. And that allows me to completely like be on the creative side in the morning, where I have sort of my best creative energy, and in the afternoon when I've got that slump and I'm through my third cup of coffee and I'm just kind of like ticking off the boxes of things that I have to do, that's where I usually do the business side. I mean, honestly, if I was purely a business person, needless to say, I would want that creative energy for the creative side of business, right? And I'm an entrepreneur as well, and so sometimes I do find that I have to, for little sprints, I have to take the whole day where I'm spending less time with my instruments or creating music, and I'm using those that morning block to be more creative in my planning of my sort of entrepreneurial business efforts. But I can only do this for short sprints, because if I go for like a week or 2 or 3 where I haven't been creating like music or playing my instruments, I get in this funk. I mean, I think most musicians can relate to that. If you kind of fall off the horse for a few weeks and you haven't been playing, it feels like a part of you is missing. And
exactly.
So, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I think you just have to. For me, I have to compartmentalize it. Some people can ebb and flow, but I have to like put my phone on do not disturb, and I have to, just focus on practicing or writing or recording or whatever, and just ignore the texts and ignore the social media and ignore all the things.
Yep.
So
I completely agree. I do that all the time as well. A quick note from Connor. He stated when you were talking about if you take a really, really low gig that's like $50 or something, he kind of talks about here, he says, if you do that, then you devalue some other of the musicians in the community with taking such low gigs. Is that something that you've seen, that people go, oh, well, I've got somebody who'll do this for $25. Why would I pay you $1,500 or whatever?
I'm right there with you, Connor, for sure. Yep. There are there's certain there's different types of gigs that I do. Like within Irish music, there's sort of like a lot of where Irish. It's interesting because in Irish music we have our own sort of interesting stuff to navigate when it comes to gigs versus just community playing music as a community. And in Irish music, like oftentimes like a pub will pay a couple of musicians to lead a community session just to make sure that it happens every week. And so the session leaders will get paid a little bit of money, and then the rest of the folks will come because the session leaders are creating like a vibrant, good little session. And so sometimes those kinds of gigs are like lower paying. I don't know. I don't want to get into the weeds on that, but there are times where you make it work, but largely I don't do that. Largely if it's a proper straight up gig that where you should be paid a certain base rate. I have an easy time saying no when somebody just throws me, a low ball offer. But I mean, it's sort of a tough thing for somebody who's just starting out gigging. There's sort of a transition period where, those new to it will take those low-paying gigs just because they're trying to get their foot in the door.
Yeah.
But I mean, it would almost be better to find another source of income to a day job, if you will, so that you can stay true to the value of what you're presenting to a potential client, a venue, gig, whatever situation. Yeah. I actually as my online shop, the Irish Flute Store. For those that want to check it out, it's irishflutestore.com. A big part of what I do is assess the value of instruments from various instrument makers, both living and not. I mean, some of these are antique instruments, but a lot of what I do is putting a right value on musical instruments that are handmade. And it's sort of a balance of not charging too much, but not charging too little, where it's basically devaluing the blood, sweat, and tears and talent that went into making that instrument. And for people getting this idea that, I could get a good flute for $200, when really, right. No. I mean, maybe you can, because one new flute maker has just decided for the first year he's going to make these things at a loss, but that really hurts everybody else. It's kind of what Connor's saying. It hurts everybody else in the space, and in the long run, it's it's really damaging to the whole scene. It's kind of like the whole deal back in the day when Napster was a thing, right?
That became an issue.
I mean, music used to be $16 an album, and then Napster came along, and all of a sudden music went from being $16 an album to being $0 an album, and so. This is a digression, but I loved. This is kind of a soapbox, and I'll try to keep it short. But like right when that happened, when Napster happened, I remember all the record companies like litigating and trying to sue, Napster, and try to sue like individuals that were using Napster and various peer-to-peer technologies to download music for free and all that kind of stuff. And what the record companies should have been doing is innovating. They should have been creating the Spotify or the Apple Music or whatever. And so what happened is you went from music being worth $16 a record to $0 a record. And then what the crazy thing is like us musicians are like, we're not being paid nearly enough for streaming or whatever. But to be a devil's advocate with the case of Spotify and Apple Music and all that, Spotify single-handedly got people from spending no money on music to $10 a month on music or whatever it is, right? And I remember, like when I started using Spotify, and there were some other services I was using before Spotify came on the scene, but my friends thought I was crazy for throwing away $10 a month for my music subscription, and I was like, "Are you kidding?" Like I used to spend $100 a month on new CDs, and for $10 a month I can get all this music, and I mean therein lies the problem, right? Like I was, now with $10 a month with Spotify, I can listen to 100 new albums a month, and only pay $10 a month. So we have that issue we have to deal with now, but my point in that is like, you've got to. As an artist, you have to not be just thinking about yourself, but also the entire sort of
ecosystem.
The ocean, the ecosystem. Yeah. I was thinking of rising tide raises all ships, right?
Right. And I was thinking of coral reefs. So
you have to think about like the environment in which you want to live and work, and and if you're creating a sort of a toxic environment because you're charging too little or nothing at all, that's not good.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Exactly.
Oh, I'm clicking the pen too much. Sorry, Phil.
Well, actually, but that's all the time we have today to end on the pen note.
Shoot.
Yep. So, but we will definitely have Blayne on again in the future. He is a fountain of knowledge. He spilled so much secret sauce today, all over. So much secret sauce. So, I mean, it's been great talking with you, Blayne. You always have so much great insight, and I know that especially thank you to Connor Shaw, who has really been involved with this process with him. I've really got to give a lot of credit to Connor, because without him and without a few other people, Kirk Vogel as well, who submitted some questions that he wanted to see answered, I really wasn't having a clear direction until Connor and Kirk Vogel came along and did that with us. So thank you again, Connor Shaw. Thank you, Mr. Vogel. Thank you, Blayne Chastain, for giving us all this great information. And this month is going to be fantastic. Yeah, this month is going to be fantastic. We are also going to have Jason Evanson, who is the director of the Cultural Affairs Department for Greeley, Colorado, and he's in charge of the Union Colony Civic Center. He will be talking about how musicians need to create media packages and kind of like pitch themselves to larger venues for those venues to then want to get in a relationship with them. And then we also have confirmed Soon Hee Newbold, who is a world-renowned composer and actress and violinist, and she actually is the former string editor at a large publishing company, the second largest in the country actually, which we will talk about that with her at the end of the month. But Blayne, you kicked off our music march, and It was fantastic. No. well, what we will do is we're going to write an article and have people be able to review that. And I'd also like, if any of you out there have additional questions for Blayne, you can email me at aaron@zovamarketing.com, or you can go in the comments and ask your questions, and then I will try and forward those on to Blayne, and Blayne answer those, and we can put those in our article, which will be published in a few weeks. So thank you all for supporting us. Thank you all for tuning in for Music March. And Blayne, did you like your tea?
Oh yeah, Earl Grey. Try it with some milk and sugar. I mean, if you haven't, you got to do it.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, until next Friday, thank you and cheers. Na zdraví. See you, Blayne.